Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the award-winning podcast where we talk about gaining, fetishism, and everything plus size. I'm Darren Aronofsky's worst fucking nightmare, James.
And I'm the thing that lives under your stairs, Tim.
And today we are joined by a very special guest, Tyler. Hello, welcome to the show, baby.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So glad to have you with us. Seeing as how Tim and I are feeling today, how are you feeling today? What kind of energy and vibe are you bringing to the conversation today?
Oh gosh. Oh God, it's hard to follow that up. You know, I'm just your cat that's in your living room that's there and you love it and you chat with it and then sometimes you have no idea where it is and it's disappeared and don't fucking look for it at that point. I'm the chatty cat right now. In general, I am the cat though.
She is the cat. We have Tyler the cat with us today, everyone. Tyler, we are so excited to have you on to Chit Chat because over the last few months, we've had the real privilege on the pod. We've had some real industry professionals reach out to us with a real intrigue and desire to sort of connect with what we do as a podcast, talking about gaining and fetishism. And right in the thick of all of that, you had reached out to us and said, "You're actually a bitch in the space. Let's have that conversation fully." And we said, yes, absolutely, let's do it. So today, we're taking more of a, would you say a therapeutic approach to gaining? Is that about right?
I think that's about right. Or like a, this is my school of therapy too, sort of like a feminist take on it, or looking at it as like, how do we feel about this? Where do we come from? Who are we, you know?
Who are we? Where are we going? Whose hands are these?
What's in my pocket?
Flames on the side of my face. And all of that is the full title of the episode. And if I can truly be fagged, I will put that as like a running text somewhere on screen as the video rolls on.
A reminder, just keep scrolling the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that one, who was it that did that? Too many cooks, too many cooks. And it was like,
yeah.
And it's just like, it's just a never-ending barrage of reminders. Like, this podcast does not condone any of the following bits and pieces. And eventually we run out of disclaimers. And so we just start like reciting the Bible.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So by the time the episode wraps, we're like partway through Genesis and people might actually learn something.
Let's educate these homosexuals.
Let's educate. And you know what, darling? That is why we have you on today, because we'd like to get some education for our listeners. So you know what? Let's take it outside of gaining for a second, because as you say, we're talking about a framework to begin with. Let's dig into that for a second. So if we think therapy, just the cloud of concept that is therapy, what are we actually talking about? Not just as a practice, but as a way of understanding.
You know, I love that question. Well, I mean, I think the first thing that does come to mind is that you're probably going to get as many answers as there are people doing therapy and all of that. I think from the way that a lot of people think about it, and then I'll get to how I do it, is I come in, I have this problem, what's wrong with me, how do we fix it type thing? What could be going on? Are there diagnoses that might fit this kind of thing? I think in reality, most therapists don't work that way. I come from a school of thought. Like I said, I'm a feminist therapist. I'm also a holistic therapist, so it's a lot of body-focused work. I come at this from more of a, I would say, spiritual place, cultural place, biological place too. It's really, if I could break it down, what's your experience? How do you feel about that? Where did you learn to feel that? And at the end of the day, do you agree with that or not? You know, like these stories that were passed to you, is that actually you? Is that what you want to do? Is that who you want to be? And that's at least where I start from. And there's different ways to go about therapy. There's some things where like if I have ADHD, I don't really need to talk about that necessarily. Like we could unpack how I feel about it, how I feel about myself in relation to that. But then there's also methods we can actually put into place to like address that. But if we take like, okay, we've done all that work and still these things are happening. Still, I don't know, or I don't know how I feel about these things. That's where we get into where did you learn that? How did you learn that? Where does that come from? To end it, like my elevator pitch to people when I work with them is I usually explain the holistic piece, which is it's a body piece. We often don't think about the body in terms of mental health, but we should. And it's about, can I find peace in my body? Can I find safety in my body? Can I find that for myself right here? Because if I have that, I can really learn to do anything. That's the first step. And the other piece that I bring in is feminist therapy, which says that's not going to be what I just said. That's not accessible for everybody. Some people don't feel safe doing that. We can talk about why they don't feel safe. We can talk about what does feel safe. What are ways where we can build this? And both of those for me are important to bring in because I'm a queer therapist and I work entirely with queer people. And so it's really taking in different experiences and biological who we are as the human coming in and respecting that and kind of starting from there.
Way back in season one, James and I were talking about how much we wanted to have people who were in the fields of psychology and sociology and other things on the show so that we could try to unpack, I mean, if not the origin of where our kink comes from, but at least to try to understand like where it may have originated and why it's developed the way that it has. And so, like, in your opinion, how could therapeutic counseling help us make sense of our own kinks and fetishes and
Mm.
alleviate any shame, fear, or doubt we could have about them?
And it's funny you say that because I was probably listening to that episode and was like, oh, I can do that, and like sent you an email. In fact, I think that's what happened. Um, Let me think. I do want to be open at first that I've actually not worked with anybody who is a gainer or has told me, I should say. So this is not pulled from there. This is pulled from my experience, but also I work with people in kink spaces, and also I work with kink and what I do. So, gosh, I guess it's a big question. Really quick, I'm fighting the therapist urge to be like, what do you mean by that? What would you like to know about that? But I'll start with mine first, and then you can actually
No,
ask
it's
me.
fine. Give us free therapy here on the podcast. We'd
Breathe.
absolutely love that. I can't afford it.
Gotta get exactly. I gotta get out of that headspace.
Yeah, me neither.
I mean, frankly, me neither. I guess first the thing that comes up for me is where I'll start from is we often try to think of these as like, where does that come from? And I think in a societal stance, that tends to be in a bad way. I'm like, well, why does that happen? That's weird. Like, that shouldn't be a thing. And so, with a lot of kink, what I'm doing with people is if we have those feelings of starting there, of like, again, how'd you learn that? Like, why did you learn that this is not an okay thing to do? And often this comes down to like, sometimes people don't even know. I think most of the time, actually, people don't have an exact story of where things come from when it comes to kink. It's a thing that I've always been interested in, and maybe it's something I've had to hide, or when I was younger, I noticed this thing happening in the locker room, and so I've had a thing for, I don't know, jockstrap since then, and that's really hot to me. That's like low level of kink, I suppose. But another thing that actually comes up for a lot of people now that I'm saying this out loud is power dynamics. And not just the power dynamic of the actual kink. I think we think of dub, dom, sub, all that fun stuff. But how would people see this if they knew that I did this? How am I seen in my community for doing this? For performers, this can be a big thing of like, I do this in the bedroom, but in my life, I'm not that type of person. And how do I grapple with this, or do I keep them totally separate, or do people think of me differently with that, especially with things that have that societal stigma to it? And so to bring it back to our question about gaining, I mean, there's a big societal stigma. So I think that comes up a lot for people. But it's not just the stigma of being fat, it's the stigma of like wanting to be fat, of encouraging that, of finding that beautiful, right? And then to add another layer to that, well, gay people, queer people, I think, but especially male gay spaces tend to be very thin focused, very anti-fat, all that shit that we probably know a little too much about. So did I even answer your question? I may have done the therapist thing and didn't answer your question.
No, but I think this is ultimately like when we spoke with Brooke Braylove a little while ago now, I think this is ultimately what it kind of comes back to. I've said this so often about what we do with this podcast. From the day the very first episode premiered, I think I turned to you, Tim, and I was like, we're already behind. Because there's so much. There's so much that can be said. So many people who we want to bring through the doors of what we do here, that there is just so much that, quite frankly, being like, hey, where did we start is almost an insulting question, because it's like, do you see the sheer volume of what we have to work with, to contend with? And then you add all the layers of framing on top of that, people of disability, people of color, age diversity, feminist lens, all of these bits and pieces. There's just so much. But what I glean from what you're saying is that ultimately, it's not that there is a definitive yes or no to can therapy help us to better understand ourselves. But I think what you're saying is, so long as one is open to the possibility of it, There could very well be. And maybe going into an experience with an open mind to say, hey, let me listen to what a bitch has to say might illuminate a couple of bits and pieces that maybe it hits now, maybe hits later on down the track, but maybe puts us in the right frame of mind for doing a little bit of unpacking and feeling a bit more at rest, at peace with some of the tensions that some of us feel around gaining. Because Lord knows some bitches out here have been doing the gaining thing for decades and they are still tense.
Right.
They are still tense. They have gained
Right.
200, 300 pounds and they are
Mhm.
sat there like, oh, I hope nobody knows. What do you mean? You're the size of a mountain. You're the size of a baby cow. Do you think that people still think you're skinny? Are you afraid of them finding out you're fat? I tell you, they have two eyes. They notice. They do
Mhm.
see you, my love. You do not hide well.
You're not the fat kid with a shirt on in a pool.
No, no,
I
no,
mean, or
precisely.
people know you're fat still.
They still know you're
It
fat.
never worked. It never worked.
But I do want to bring to here, actually, thinking about
Mm.
this, joking about people who've been in the community for so many years and have that struggle, but you yourself have been a
Mm.
part of the gaming community for a number of years. 2 decades or so, would you say?
Roughly, which is weird to say. It's weird when
Right.
you get to that point in your life.
Crazy, right? Do you mind giving us a quick snapshot? Like, you joined
Yeah.
the space. How did you discover gaming? Were you in a larger body at the time? Do you want to give us a
Mhm.
little snapshot of your personal journey from
Yeah,
then to now?
absolutely, absolutely. And it's funny, it plays into the first question you're asking, like, how do people get into this? I have, which is so weird to say. I mean, I've been off and on for 20 years. I would not say that I'm a person people knew in that time. Like, and also I'm 35. So I was underage at a certain time. I think a lot of people identify with that of like, we shouldn't have been there. Probably all three of us. I don't know.
I
But we were
was 18 for 6 years. Thank you
No,
very much.
I'm old, so like we didn't even get the internet until I was 17, and then I didn't discover the Gainerverse till I was 18. So,
Okay, so
you
you
know,
actually,
Yeah,
did it
well,
yeah,
when
all.
I
he
was because I'm old.
yeah, when he was dialing the number, he had to speak to the woman at the switchboard and said, "Can you please patch me through to this area code?"
Yeah, to
Not that old, but I did use a
uh
rotary phone.
beefy
Okay.
frat back then. I don't know which one it was. My actual answer though, I mean, I was an unsupervised child on the internet. And honestly, actually, that's an interesting question. I don't quite know exactly the age or when that started, or I started looking at these things. I know Yahoo groups played a big part of it, which again, what a treasure trove that was. What a time. Yahoo groups, I was also on, not really talking though, but I was also on Belly Builders. That was definitely the first one that I was like actually on and like occasionally engaging with because I was also on other forums at the time, so that just felt pretty natural. And then what was that other one? Well, there's Fat Nats, which is actually the one that we should have been on. Which I occasionally I lurked a lot, I would say. Like those first like 5 years, I wasn't really. Um
Gainer web?
Gainer Web, thank you. That's the other one. I was like, I know there's another one. It's Gainer Web, and then there's Bigger City, but Bigger City wasn't
No, that's
really
just you might be
Gainer.
thinking belly builders.
No, I was on both. And I think it
You
was
were on
Belly
both.
Builders
Okay.
I learned. People were like, so Belly Builders is for the place for people who like want to be fat and like it, and Bigger City is for the people who don't like being fat, but they feel like they have to go to a place like that to find people. And I've actually had friends that were on there now that are just bigger bears that are not into gaining that have said the exact same thing. So that's where I got my start. I'd say, again, a lot of lurking, like not really posting. I did start chatting with people more, probably 17, 18, made some friends on there. Something that actually persisted for quite a while. And then I've had the like unfortunate choice. This is my own choice, and in retrospect, is like obvious. I went to school in Burlington, Vermont, very fit city, very like hippie city. Not a lot of gainers, if you can believe it, within a large radius. Boston, then I lived in China. Then I moved to Boston. China, of course, there's nobody. And Boston's also a very fit city. So there's this like I travel for that. So now I've got friends in the area that I know, and I kind of keep it within the New England area, I'd say. So that's, I guess, my journey. I've been on it my whole friggin' life. And I'd say it's probably maybe the last 10 years where I've been more open about that and kind of like that's been in my life and a thing that comes up, if that makes sense. And it's actually interesting because when you were talking about people who've been in the community for a long time and like, oh, the psychology of that and all of that, my immediate thought was, well, there's a lot of that. There's some people who've gained a ton of weight. I've gained weight, but relatively little compared to most people for a mixture of factors. Part of that being I don't gain weight very easily. Part of that being I'm an anxious person, and when I'm anxious, Eating is the last thing I'm going to do, and so
Thank
even
you. Can
it's
we
a
can we listen? Can we just take a moment right now?
mm,
I'm so kind of curious about this. There's
mm,
such the stereotype of, oh, if you're stressed, you'll eat. And like, that was never me growing up. And I
mm,
feel like everyone who we bring this up to is the same way.
yeah,
Where are the stress eaters? Where are the people who are meant to be engaging with the anxiety of the pressure of
Outside the
this
community.
community,
Outside the
actually
exactly
having
community.
outside the
success?
community. Yeah,
Yeah, it's outside. It's people outside. It's people who, have nothing to do with anything with
life's
us.
a bitch.
Just
Like,
yeah.
The
like the
audacity
amount
of
of
some
friends that I
people,
have.
isn't it? They put their little stories online. They go, "I've struggled with my weight all my life," and you just look at them and you're like,
Damn.
I I feel such rage. I feel such silent rage that I can never express because you would think I was a psychopath. Like, what do you mean you want my
Yeah,
fat? What do you mean you want
yeah,
my body? This is absolutely insane.
right.
Anyways.
No, I'm with you. It's that, oh, I've struggled with my weight my whole life. And it's like, I mean, kind of same.
Well, but
My
then
bad.
remember,
Similar journey.
remember too, we have to frame this within they're mad at where the fat is on their body.
Also very true. Incredibly true. And there was that brief period of time before Ozempic where some people were like, actually, this is great. Actually, wait, I do like this. And they went right back in to that cupboard as soon as that
You
happened.
know what, baby? That's
Hmm.
a whole other conversation. It's like the irony of the anti-fat lib people who are like, Lizzo lost weight just proves that fat liberation is dead. Like, first of all,
Like,
you're
fuck all of you.
stupid. But
Yeah.
also, like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but if your favorite fat celebrity lost all the weight and suddenly they're like backtracking on all the body pos stuff, they were never body positive. I'm sorry to tell you, they were literally
Crazy
making
thought.
do with what they had because
Mhm.
they felt this was their only avenue to some form of joy, which is why the moment they thought they had an opportunity to eschew the thing that they actually find disgusting about themselves, they took that shit and they leaped. Which, and now let's not be shady about this, let's be very reasonable. If there was a magic pill that made you fat, don't tell me your motherfuckers wouldn't take that pill because I would
Right.
also take that pill. So I feel like as much as we might need to remind people, hey, maybe they're not really repping body positivity like we would have wanted them to, we also can't fault a bitch for wanting to be in the body that they want to be in. You know,
Yes.
there's addendums to that with let's not deny that nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. Let's not deny the fucking links to Jeffrey Epstein trying to make everybody look like an underage 12-year-old through links to wanting everyone to be thin. Like, let's not forget any of that stuff. I'm just saying, when it comes to the whole like, oh, we lost another one. Unfortunately, you didn't, honey. We never had them.
It's almost like I hate the way that radical awareness and like feminism and such came into people's lives in the past 10 years because a lot of people are like not doing anything out of the ordinary or radical at all. They're just like mad about it now. Because part of like what you're saying, which I completely agree with, is yeah, okay, these people weren't the people you thought they were, and they're not these big heroes and all of that. But also, all of this is about systems that have kind of made all of this that you're also dealing with, and that's why
Yeah,
we all have these things, right? Like,
that's why any
it,
of this exists at all, baby. The systems that designed to fuck us up. Even
wait,
gainers within the community, baby, people who leave the space, right? And there's been some really gross language around people who are like, quote unquote, fake gainers, uncommitted gainers, that kind of accusation being hurled at people because they decided that they wanted to lose weight. And don't get me wrong, they were maybe someone that you really enjoyed jerking off to. I understand you are no longer able to look at their content in the same lens, sure. But also, you might want to change your mind for any given reason, and the freedom of choice means the freedom to choose, which also means you don't have the right to tell people what to do with their bodies, which is the whole like klaxon call of gaining that I have the right to do what I want with my body. So let's remember, people, let's not be fascistic about this. Just because it applies to us doesn't mean we then like turn around and put it on other people. Just because we're in the position of power at that point in time, just because it suits us, let's be very conscious to be like, actually, when it doesn't work for anyone at any time at all, and it should always be
right.
put in its little box of fascism and put in the corner.
Right. It's that like, do you really hate these systems or do you want to be the one doing it? And especially in queer communities, we see this all the fucking time. all the fucking time.
Yes, because people showed up looking for a handout. They said, I wanted to find community, but then they didn't go to community events. They went to nightclubs. They looked for hookups. They went to the apps. They
Right.
didn't look to make friendships. They looked to find fuck buddies. And I'm not saying that you can't have people who blur the lines and straddle both because we're mature adult human beings and we can contain multitudes. We can do all of the things. But let's not get it twisted, people, right? Like, if you really want the thing, you have to go ahead and do the thing, which is also the difference between gaining and bloating, gaining and padding, right? There's the fantasy of doing the thing, but then there's also the if you want the thing, you have to actually do the thing. And
Yes.
therein lies the schism that some people don't like. You know what I mean? It's like there's a wall there, a very invisible. It's the glass dome in that one TV show where it's like, for some reason, I can't find my way past this. And it's like, you just have to climb. You have to get over it, right? Uh, Also, and I would just like to say, this is not around the ways like losing track, because I feel like all of the things we're talking about here are the most common psychological moments that we as a gainer community seem to really find our way going through. So I hope we're all keeping up here, right? There's clearly a lot to unpack. So let's be clear, I don't think we're going to get to everything this episode, but we're going to try and see how far we can get. So, deferring to you here, Zach Tyler, where do you think we go from here? What would you like to talk about next?
I think a lot of this question and what you were just talking about with me does, or what it reminds me of rather, this kind of brings me to that piece of queer history, bear history, how gainers fit into this. And because my last piece that I think I'd say about what we just said, which will be a good transition into a more historical piece of all of this, to break it down like feminist theory and all that shit. And I kind of hate the academic language with it because I prefer to be a human. But what it's really talking about is like, look, we all grew up in these systems. And that's neither good nor bad necessarily, but that does mean we've all been impacted by it. And because we all look different and we all move through the world differently, that means that we see different parts of that system. And we probably understand the problems in that system differently. And it's very human to feel rejected by something, especially society, and then find a place where you feel like you're not rejected, and then just become that thing that you've always ostensibly hated. Because what you haven't done, and again, we all do this. This is like a thing that I think humans do throughout our lives, and we do it again and again. What's the difference? Like what's the difference between you and the people that you don't like or that you felt kept you down or any of this? Because they have reasons for wanting to do that to you too. Like if we can't let everybody just be, you are no different than them. You just want to be the guy, right?
It's the uncomfortable conversation that many of us genuinely through the course of life, whether it be queerness or size or race or whatever our intersections and life experiences may be, we're made a victim of a person, of a situation, of a time, and there is all the space in the world to hold for someone who needs the big hug. Because we should all be hugged and made to feel safe from the fact that we experienced what we felt. But if you don't do the work to heal from your pain, then the most likely outcome is that you will simply become the next abuser in line. Because
Right. Right.
our instinct is, oh, I contain all this pain. I want it to heal. I want it to go away from me. A physical pain, our body's immune systems are designed to heal from, and eventually we do get better. But an emotional, spiritual, social, psychological pain, we have no physical system to expunge it. So the only thing we can do is look at another human being and feed it to them and
Yes.
make them be the recipient of it. It's the whole I had it tough, why should you have it easy? Which very problematic concept. I think a lot of us, especially who came from immigrant parents, generation parents, working class parents, felt a lot of that growing up. So again, many of us, I think, will have had that experience, but this is a moment, y'all. Like, if you haven't done the work to heal from that, there is only, for the majority part of it, one way that's going to go. So this, I think, is if you're feeling a little tense right now, you're feeling a little cold to the surface, a little bit, little resonant there. Let's have a think about why that might be, and hold space for that as we continue this episode.
Actually, I want to pin because you asked where to go, and we could do this later too, because something you said at the end there was immune system wise, we have a way to deal with physical pain, and we do, but we don't have a psychological one. And interestingly, I would say we do, and we actually have a very, very powerful one, but we're never taught it. And Tim, I feel like, do you know where I'm going with this? If you even
I
know.
mean, sort of like well, when I think about like actually when he said there's no like defense system for psychological trauma, I was like, oh well, there's DID. But that's not
Well,
something that you want anybody to have to go through. Like that's
right.
terrible.
Even
But
abusive tendencies, it's like that's your psyche trying to protect itself. That's
yeah.
not wrong necessarily. What you're doing is wrong, but where it's coming
Mhm.
from, it's not necessarily evil. It's a
Yeah.
protective thing, right? But
And I would assume that depression is also to an extent kind of a defense mechanism. Any mental state that we enter in which we end up ruminating on is probably some kind of psychological defense mechanism against trauma.
Oh yeah, like anxiety is meant to like protect us from the future, but a little bit is good just to keep us on our toes, but a little too much or a lot of too much ends up becoming a very damaging way of approaching life.
and this is really what we're talking about. This is my specialty in therapy. And when we're talking about holistic therapy, like this is the conversation. And so to make just quick sense of all of that, of like what are we saying when we're saying what does that do for you? What's that protective piece? Is really it's evolutionary, right? And my how I got here is I have a weird story of how I became a therapist, but my undergraduate was actually animal science, which is animal rehabilitation. It's doing things on farms, it's nutrition, it's all of that. And part of that is psychology of how do you make an animal feel relaxed? How do you work with it so that you can change its behaviors? It needs to be in this relaxed state to do that. And we're very comfortable saying that for animals, but we're not comfortable saying that for people of like, well, you should probably make people feel comfortable and safe. And can they find that safety before you try to challenge them? So that was always an interesting question to me. But also through that lens, through like an evolutionary lens of the body and our psychology and trauma, the mind works from a bottom up, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Orientation, right? Like your brain stem is basic survival. In reptiles, it's on or off. Really, that's why alligators sit there for like days at a time and don't need to eat anything because their brain is kind of in a low energy state. They don't need it. For us, that's stuff that's autonomic. That's your heart rate. That's your breathing. That's autonomic functions, things inside your body you don't have to think about mostly. Breathing, I'll come back to because it's not fully autonomic. A step up from that is what we call the like mammalian brain, right, or however you want to refer to that, but the middle brain, which is your emotions, it's your regulation. It's not where fight or flight comes from, but it is where it's mediated. Like my sense of safety is my I'm gonna fuck it up now. Hippocampus.
Yeah, I think so.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Hippocampus.
Yeah.
Well, judging by the size of you, you put the hippo in hippocampus. So,
Yeah, because the hypothalamus is the one that regulates hormones.
Yes, thank
So
you.
yeah.
Yeah, and that was the other one. I was like, am I confusing them? It's the hippocampus. And so I'll come back to that because it's very important here. And then the final layer, quote unquote, of the brain for us is the prefrontal cortex, the human mind. This is where like you live. This is what we know. This is our logical brain. So God, I can talk about this so many ways. I can talk about this in Buddhist psychology. I can talk about this evolution, but the evolutionary perspective here is when you're overwhelmed by emotion and you're in fight or flight, like your body is entirely oriented towards survival. It's not thinking about anything else. It's not thinking about your self concept. It's not thinking about remembering these memories. What it's doing is like, how do I get out of this and get safe again? Right. And the body has naturalistic things of like, we get to safety and we rest. And when we feel grounded, we move on. Animals do this like really naturally. A deer that's wounded, this is a Buddhist story, will a deer that's wounded will run into the forest and find a quiet place to sit, and then it will sit until it feels better. But we don't do that. A lot of times we feel like we have to keep going, or maybe the danger you went through wasn't physical, it was emotional, and you never could acknowledge it or could be helped to make sense of it. What actually is happening is your middle brain is was in fight or flight, it was dysregulated. That's what dysregulated means. You're not encoding those memories because you're just trying to survive. But now also those memories have never been encoded. You never came back to physical safety. And so when you think about the thing, this is what being triggered means. When you think about the thing, it brings up that body memory. You are sent right back to feeling terrified or feeling powerless or whatever. So if you're going through that cycle, you can't learn from the thing that happened and you can't bring it into your whole sense of being because it still doesn't feel safe. And at that point, that's when what I do comes into play, which is body focus. Where do you feel in your body? Can you bring safety to that? Can you breathe? Can you focus on your breath? Because if I'm hyperventilating, let's not go there. If I'm really elevated, I'm breathing quickly, and I can slow down my breath, my heart rate naturally slows down. It's the same system. When that happens, my muscles start to relax. When my muscles start to relax, that's connected to my brain. So my brain starts to feel like maybe it's not so dangerous anymore, actually. And so the holistic view with all of this is really bringing the body into the healing process and kind of saying, well, we can't do this in the brain because the brain is where the issue is. Like you're not going to logic yourself out of trauma. In fact, you probably understand it very well. That's not the issue. The issue is like, can you feel it? Can you bring your body in with all of this and like be embodied, very literally?
Mm. That it makes me very curious about a potential benefit of gaining within the therapeutic process. As our bodies physically grow, there is more to it. And this is a conversation that comes up a lot with the podcast. As people experience their bodies, they become so much more self-aware of them, externally and internally. For many of us externally, as we shower, we discover more of our new nooks and crannies, rolls and folds, and we become so much more aware of the care that we need and the dimension and space we take up. And internally, we become much more aware of the way that our body feels, the way we react to certain foods, to exercise, to impetus, to illness, to all of those things. And so I wonder if there could be, theoretically, a boon to gainers beginning to process therapy through a body lens. The idea that you've now got literally a lot more body to work with, and it's a body that you really like. And so perhaps utilizing that as a way to process traumas, to move forward in life, might be a very kind of two birds with one stone situation
Yes.
where there's a co-mutual benefit of now that you've done this for yourself, you can do a little bit more for yourself, which to me ties into the belief I have about like the world and how things work, which is just, yes, gaining is a sex thing, but it's also a gender thing. It's a
Yeah.
fulfillment for me personally. Like my maleness and non-binariness are both affirmed by the gaining journey. My will to live, my desire to be here on this earth, to take up space, is affirmed by the fact that I'm pursuing the gaining journey because I'm affirmed in the body that I'm in. I am euphoric, not dysphoric. I am here, makes me very, very happy. And as a result of that, I'm more aware of things and I'm more willing to engage in that process. So I wonder if all of this culminates in the notion that I am just by destiny, by divine providence, meant to be this larger person, fulfilled by the fact that in multiple ways it makes me happy, it gives me a fulfillment of some description, and that to pursue the gaining journey might mean that process through therapy becomes easier because I'm in the correct body. I'm in the more affirmed and truest sense of myself. Of course, therapy is going to be easier. Of course, making friends and feeling fulfilled is going to be easier. I am constantly gaining proximity to the truest version of me that I am supposed to be. So, to my mind, all of that makes sense in that very esoteric cloud of everything that kind of spindles out the tapestry of how all of these ideas weave together. All of that makes very, very much it makes sense to me, basically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you got to the gender piece before I did, because that's what came up for me is like, that's why when I give people my elevator pitch, it's like there's the feminist piece because I'm not going to sit here with a trans woman in the beginning of her transition being like, where do you feel safe in your body? Like, that's kind of ridiculous. I'll have the conversation. Is there any access to that? But for a lot of people, when you do feel comfortable and safe in your body, it feels a lot better. And I think that's absolutely true for gainers as well, where there's, when you can sit in your body and it actually feels good, is like a whole other ball game in terms of this. And actually, there's a really, really easy example, I think, that probably anybody listening to this right now can just check themselves and do, of like a body check that I think we all run into is, are you holding your gut in right now? Are you breathing in through your diaphragm? I guarantee you're not. Not because you're fat, but because nobody does that. And because we're taught not to do that in certain cultures. And so if you're holding yourself like that, of course you're not going to feel comfortable saying, yeah, I'm fat and I love being fat. Your breathing's restricted, right? But the spiritual piece that you're speaking, well, I'm going to use the word spiritual that you're speaking about at the end, and I mean this in like a non-denominational how does my friend put it? Jesus optional or something. Not about God. Is that piece of, is there like a destiny piece to this? Is there oh my God, there's a fancy psychology word for this too. It's not synchronicity. Synchronicity is when things seem to happen just all at once and they seem to line up for you, which I do think happens when we're doing what we're talking about, of living the life you want to live, being embodied in the way you want to be embodied, like being fat because you want to be fat. But it's to back up a step, I guess, we often, this is posed as, is it nature versus nurture? Was I born as a person who wants to get fat, or was I raised to be a person who wants to get fat? Is it because I got fat and I ended up enjoying it? And this, in my mind, the psychology answer and the evolutionary answer and the Buddhist answer is like, yes, they're all true, right? Like nature and nurture is a false dichotomy when it comes to evolution because both are true. It has to be kind of there to tick something in your DNA or your natural being or however you want to say it, and it needs to be in the environment. And lacking one, the other can make up for it. And because that's just, we don't live in a DNA world, we live in the real world. Um, and so I do think it's a very spiritual thing when I think of it. Same with being queer generally, of like, yeah, we probably lean towards this naturally anyway, and the experience of it can be positive and affirming and build us up, which then makes it even more so, right? And so I think all are true, and it is the process of becoming who we are, right?
Something that I'm just genuinely curious about from your perspective, and hoping for a little bit of advice
Hmm.
is, I'm 42, so I'm on the elder millennial side of things.
Mhm.
And I've noticed a lot with some of the younger people that I go and spend time with at the bars is that like it's this extremely different mentality and approach to everything.
Yes.
And I notice that there's a lot of friction that ends up happening between, and I'll say old guard and new guard just to kind of give it some context.
Hmm.
And so like, I understand that a lot of the anxiety that older people are feeling all across the world is that they're going to be left behind. So like how do you evolve and integrate and communicate with the younger generation on their level
Yeah.
so that you don't get left behind?
I
Mm.
love this question. I love this fucking question. Yeah, because I agree with you. And I think it has a lot, well, we can talk about that, where it comes from. Difference in how we were raised, I think difference in how queerness was used. Um, because what I've seen, and I do think I think old guard, new guard is a good way to put it, because it's happening kind of across the board. And that said, I think there's actually communities who've navigated it very well and it's kind of reintegrated, but there has to be a moment of like rift. There's a lack, maybe a lack of understanding on both sides, or at least from the younger folks. I don't think they quite get where I'm going to say we come from, because I'm also, my siblings 7 years older than me. All my friends are 7 to 10 years older than me. Uh, the way I put it is, I think people are sold this idea now, and I was sold it too. But again, I have a sort of older mentality that being queer is just normal now and it's totally fine, and you don't have to worry about all those things that people didn't have had to worry about in the past. And to just an extent, I guess that's true. But I think especially, in college, that's true, where schools talk about these things. But I have the very firm belief that once people get out into the world, there's a certain point in your 20s where you start to realize like that was a fucking lie. That actually, no, you're not going to, you could. But if you want to get married, if you want to have kids, you want to get a house, you want to live that whole fantasy, A, you have a lot more chances to ask yourself if you really fucking want that, which straight people often don't feel they can. But two, there's a lot of, did I say A and two? I did. Anyway, two, there's a lot of people who, like, are you going to adopt? How are you going to have kids? You're going to have a sperm donor. Like, there's more questions in there for queer people. And I just think the longer you go on, the more different your life looks. And so I think young folks come in without that knowledge of the history of like why people are here. And I think there's actually a lot of overlap in terms of what we're looking for. And I think there can actually be very strong community there. We just don't know it yet.
It makes me think of what I find is often the critique, but also celebration of the typical gainer hangout, a Gromoff.
Mm,
There's this projected notion of what could be there is some fulfillment of a sex, because in a majority of queer event spaces, there is a facilitation of sex in whatever
mm,
way that sex looks like, manifests. It is permissible, right? And so you've got the sort of catch between of that and the idea of it being purely a social thing. The idea of I should have permission to let my sense of gainer hang out by showing up to the function with my belly hanging out in clothes that are too tight, drinking a lot of beer and belching, farting perhaps, and maybe smelling a bit, depending on like uh the specific bits that people might want to bring into a gainer space. You've got all of that, but then we were having the lunch at a pub and we're just sharing that space with civilians on a Saturday afternoon. So there's this, how do you sometimes find that line between what feels most comfortable for everyone and less comfortable for some? And it is challenging. I think ultimately the answer is probably somewhere in the realm of we just need more.
Yeah, I
We
agree.
just need more. Like, I don't think we need to do the capitalistic thing of reducing everything down to one homogenized idea and say that this will do well for every single person. Rather more like finding that middle spot where it's like, yeah, it's untenable to have something personalized to each and every individual person. That's not possible. But also, like, let's have some generality. Let's have some like big sweeping notions and understand that, you know, everything's a bus. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Because this conversation comes up in politics. People are like, I'm looking for the right politician. I'm looking for the perfect. Baby, you are never going to find the perfect person. You've got to take the bus, which means you have to walk a little out of your way to get to it. And it's going to take you a good distance and it's going to drop you off a little bit out of your way. And then you got to make that distance. That's how public transport works. It's got to do its best job for as many people. I think we need some more of us get into the idea of the bus in multiple things. But I do want to zero in because you've talked to us
Mm.
about these retreats when we had our intro call. And I believe
Mhm.
it's with Eastern Mountain. Is that right?
Great.
Bare Your Soul?
Hmm.
So give us a little snapshot. Like, what is the space designed to offer? And with that, I have a follow-up question I would like to ask. Once you give me the little description of the Bear Your Soul event.
Oh, so Easton Mountain, I do retreats there. I don't live there. I'm sort of like half a part of, I'm a part of the community. I don't live there, but it's also an intentional community of gay men who've set this up. Easton Mountain itself had its roots in the 90s in events for men kind of connecting with their bodies after the AIDS crisis, and that mostly Catholic men, from what I understand, that transitioned into Easton Mountain in about 2000, 2001. I think it's 2000, 2000. They bought the space and they do retreats for men. People live there, um, and they're just a resource for the community. Bare Your Soul in particular is well, an event for bears that a really good friend of mine has become a really good friend of mine. Freddie Freeman put on. He himself is a bear. He's been in the community for like 20, I'd say 20 years. He was a performer for a long time, actually, musician. So like any of the bear musicians that you know, he's probably known at some point or played with. Like, I don't think he's as big of a deal anymore, but like Tom Goss, they were really close. Um, I cannot, Big Dipper, I know he knows. Um, but Freddie, after he stopped perform, he put on a concert for bears, and they would travel, and bears in the community would get together and put on shows, which got him thinking about really connecting on a deeper level as bigger men. He had been to bear runs, he'd been to all those things, and there's always that focus on sex and food and the debauchery of it all. So he wanted to make a space that was more grounded and spiritual and maybe brought in that sexual piece, but kind of helped men heal. Um, and so Bare Your Soul in particular is a lot of things like there will be workshops throughout the weekend that involve connecting with other people. It might involve sensual touch. It might involve naked sensual touch. It might involve talking about that afterwards. What did that feel like? What was it like for you? There's workshops that I have seen grown ass men sob at. And the question asked is, or the challenge to them rather is you're just going to tell this person what you want them to do to you. And that's it. And you can't respond. You don't have to give them anything back. It's just that. And when you ask men, especially of a certain generation, but I think all men, that question, most of us have never done that. That's not a thing that men are allowed to do. That's you play a part, you do a thing. You don't have a need and someone just does it for you. And then the body side of things, we all know what it's like to be a fat gay man in a gay world that is not about that. So how has that impacted you? How can we heal that? How can we form community? So that's a snapshot of what it is. Um, it's always a lot of fun. If anybody finds that interesting, you should absolutely look it up because like I do a lot of retreats at Easton Mountain. I help out, I teach, I do all that.
Hmm.
And I've been at the transition between an event and Barrier Soul, and they are way more lively because I think these bears have a lot more shit to get through. So we have a lot of fun, frankly.
So the question I want to ask here, and I feel like in a way you're almost kind of dancing around this, just describing the event, right? My question is, what changes when fat men are centered rather than accommodated?
Oh, that's great. And it makes me think of actually a lot of changes that I've been helping out at Easton for about 3 or 4 years, probably three. And I'll give you some examples and then can get into the nitty gritty. So like when I first came in, the big question was how do we get more young people here? How do we get more trans guys here? How do we get more a diverse crowd generally? Because for one reason or another, the crowd that goes there eventually has been old white dudes. And that's not a critique. It's just who could afford to do it over 20 years and who was starting it, right? And they've been trying to do that. And Barrier Soul has actually been, from what I've seen, the biggest driver of just bringing this stuff in because when you are centering fat men and fat people, you're already considering that there are different bodies, that people are different and they have different experiences. A. B, you're thinking about ability. Like, is this accessible? Can people get around? Are there folks to help people move things, get off the floor, do all of that? We're already having very open and real conversations about our bodies and our bodies being different and our own discomfort with our bodies, even when sometimes we love it. Like a big thing you'll hear is people saying, actually, I love my body. I realize it's in the world. I don't like it. And it's not my body, it's the way that I'm treated, right? I'm sure many people listening to this also know that feeling. So by doing that, I think because you're centering fat men and it brings in this culture, it signals to people that this is a place where you can do that. Like we do have a very wide range of ages that come to Barrier Soul. We have a very large contingent of trans men who make up like the core of it and are an ever growing piece because in my mind, they may say something different, I'm sure they would, but there's already this culture of like, yeah, you belong here. Yeah, it's cool. If someone has a problem with it, that's their fucking issue. And we're not going to let them, that's not even going to be a conversation. It's not even like we're going to have to get onto them. That's not going to be a thing. So I think it signals what the space can be, at least. And then ultimately in practice, I mean, I think it opens a lot of people up to what the world actually is versus what we're told it is, and that we can live in this at any time. We can feel proud of our bodies at any time. We can feel sexy at any time. But we're also going to be around people who haven't done this work that we've done. And how can we hold that, you know?
So, as a way to kind of round out the conversation, I'd like to know, like, as a person who's part of the gaining community and a person who is like, kinky in general, how does that shape the way that you do therapy? Like, what's your approach as a therapist to being part of these communities?
So that, because there's a broader piece too. There's that, but there's also my whole background's it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I'm poor faggot from the South. And when I say poor, I mean like there's a sociological group, poor white, poor capital P, capital W. That's us, like sharecroppers. My grandparents are sharecroppers. When you come from that sort of intergenerationally poor place, when you come from the South, the American South, when you're very queer and when you're also very kinky and therefore even different within the queer space. And I would even say I'm even that kinky of a person, but gaining is like, for the general queer community, like, whoa, gay community, I should say. I think that's all of that is what informs me just wanting to show up as a person and as a human. Like the way that I'm talking here is not so different than the way I talk as a therapist. Like there's probably some things that I would or wouldn't say. I curate differently, or I might like engage a little differently. But it's important for me to do that because it's normalizing. It's kind of whatever you're bringing in. I'm not going to be weird and cold and clinical about it. And that also works for some people. Some people prefer that style. But I'm working with a lot of people who maybe have never had someone just like let them be. Like you're talking about something, and I'm not going to ask you a question that's weird about it, or I'm not going to ask you to explain it. I'm going to just follow along with you. And if I do have a question, there's just a way that I think queer folks that are in it would pose that question versus someone who's an ally and really wants to understand, right? Like I really try to keep that language out of it because it's also just not natural to me. So I'm engaging them as a person, frankly.
And what would you want our listeners to take away from this conversation as they reflect on their own gaining and fetus journeys?
The therapist question is, where do you feel that in your body? But the real answer is, I guess I would wonder how much of themselves can they bring to this kink and to, if they're a part of it, the bear community or to queer life. Like how comfortable can you be letting people in? And you also, I guess that's your journey to go on. Do you want to let people in? But regardless, can you feel okay about this? Can you feel unashamed about this? Can you feel ashamed and acknowledge it and then do it anyway? What narratives have built that? I think we know a lot of like what the world says about fat, right? But we don't get a lot of access to what is it when you're a person who likes that, who wants to get fat, who is into that, and how do you walk in both of those worlds? Because you probably will have to. Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest piece is don't be ashamed about it. We don't have to be, and even questions of where does this come from can be based in that. Can we bring like curiosity to that of like who am I, and can I just discover who I am in a more but in well-rounded way, right?
The whole reason we started these thematic episodes, right? Like these kind of more esoteric, diving into the psychological, the historical, the scholarly approach to theorem around humanity and how that intersects with gaining is because I think so many of us really do have these questions and either find it exhausting not getting any answers in a community that is just asking you for belly pics all the time, but also for people who probably just feel a bit fed up where they're just like, I feel like there maybe isn't an answer. And I feel like today is a continuation of that conversation. There is dialogue and discussion, and there are people who like Tyler, who maybe you could see if they have slots available for sessions. Maybe reach out with a message, pay a bitch her coin, helps her get fatter, and gives you therapy. Like, is that not a fabulous exchange of goods and services? I think it is. Let's get the gainer economy going. But I think that this just signifies that there is something there to be delved into. And I think if you're someone who has the want to do the delving, to unpack, to be a part of conversation, reach out, talk to people, keep the conversation going. But I think this has been a fabulous episode, Tyler. Thank you so much for your time today, sweetheart.
Thank you for having me. It's been so much fun.
Now, where can the listeners find you online?
You can find me on Grommr at Gertha Kit. Other than that, I'm kind of hard to find online.
Well, there we go. We can start with the Grommr and take it from there, y'all. But that is a wrap now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram at thiccymouse and Grommr at orpheus.
You can also find us on social media at Thicc Radio or visit our website at thiccradio.com.
Consider supporting the show by donating to our PayPal or by subscribing to our Patreon, where you can enjoy extra helpings, a behind-the-scenes conversation with this week's guest where nothing is off the table.
And if you send us a letter to thiccradio@gmail.com, we might just read it on the show. That's all for now, y'all. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is an independent production.
Artwork, media design, editing, and production by James Heinzen.
With original theme music by CYMK.
I feel good. How was that? Was that
It was
too?
good. No, it was good.